Training and Education in Islam by Ayatollah Murtuda Mutahhari. Chapter 17, Factors Contributing to Training, Part 2, Love, Strengthening of the Truth-Seeking Feeling, and Vigilance and Self-Reckoning. Among the issues raised in Islamic training and education is the issue of love, and its opposite, violence. Of course, the opposite of love is usually spite, but the effect of love is favor and leniency, while that of spite is violence and harshness. We know that some people have criticized Islamic training and education, saying that in Islam the issue of love and its effect, which is favor and leniency, is not emphasized much. If ever, the issue of love of fellow human beings or compassion and leniency to them is discussed. On the contrary, the issue of enmity towards fellow human beings and the use of violence or mistreating others is also discussed. We also know that those who emphasize love are Christians and their priests. They always talk about love, saying that what Jesus Christ preached was nothing but love. His love encompassed all people, whether worthy to be loved or not, theists or atheists, his followers or not. Rather, he preached that one should love everybody. In a book on world religions, and perhaps it was translated into an article, I read that there is a sentence which is common and collectively belongs to all religions. It is present in Christianity, it can be found in Judaism, it exists in Zoroastrianism, it exists in Islam, it is available in Buddhism. That is, do unto others what you want others do unto you, and do not do unto others what you do not want others do unto you. We have many similar injunctions in Islam. For example, in Nahjul Balagha, letter 31, it states, "Desire for people what you desire for yourself, and hate for them what you hate for yourself." This injunction, which exists also in Islam, is a universal and absolute injunction. Now, the question is, does Islam entertain any exception to this universal rule while there is no such exception in other religions? Is there no exception in Christianity while there is exception in Islam? Does Islam really enjoin you to desire for only some people what you desire for yourself, or enjoin you to desire for people what you desire for yourself on only selected matters? Is there any exception in Islam or not? The difference that exists between Islam and Christianity lies in the interpretation of love and not in the universal principle. Two types of love. Let us start with this injunction, which is believed to be commonly owned by all religions. Is to love something for oneself always logical? You may possibly say, we object to this question because what is said is to desire for others what one desires for oneself. It is possible for a person to desire something which is not supposed to be desired. In other words, the issue of lovability or desirability of a thing is different from the issue of its essentiality for a person. If someone is diabetic and honey is bad for him, but he himself wants to eat honey, he will be told, "Since you want honey, although it is bad for you, we have to give you, because we have to desire for people what we desire for ourselves, although it is bad for you." Is this the meaning of the injunction or not? No. Desire or love here is a rational and logical one, which is synonymous with what is expedient. It means that in terms of what is really good and wholesome, just as you always desire what is good and wholesome for yourself, you must also desire for all people what is good and wholesome. To desire for people what is good and wholesome is different from this love which we and the Christians usually refer to, or the outward love expressed by doing something which is pleasant for a person. For example, parents love their own children, desiring what is good and wholesome for him. This desire for what is good and wholesome for one's child can possibly manifest in two forms. Ignorant parents who love their child and want to express this love tend to manifest it by giving him whatever he likes and not giving him whatever he dislikes. My child wants such and such food. I love my child and I cannot afford not to give him whatever he likes. But regarding a medicine or medical injection which my child does not really like, but since I love my child, I have to say, as my child does not like it, I would never annoy him. This is one way of expressing love. Another way of expressing love is coupled with logic, that is, love which is in conformity with what is expedient at the present as well as in the future. This is the real love and beneficence. He may like it or dislike it. Thus, if we try to interpret this universal injunction which is common to all religions in this unconditional way as what all religions really mean, to behave with people in whatever way they like, then we have to say that this injunction of religions is a false one, and this is so in all religions, God forbid. To express love, compassion, and kindness to people or the society cannot be based on what they like. We have cited the following example time and time again. According to this logic, we have to say that the officer on radio is doing this in a so-called logical and proper way. That is, by asking the people what they want to be aired and doing it accordingly, putting on the disc of whatever music they want to listen to. It is possible for people to desire for something which, if materialized, will bring them into the brink of misery and corruption. However, if its love is indeed a real one, it will not follow statistical data. Most listeners are youth, both male and female, who request for such and such disc of music to be played, and then say, we are at the service of the people. We are serving the people. We air whatever they like. Behaving according to demand is different from behaving according to welfare. The profound, rational, and logical love of parents cannot be limited by the child's desire or the present time. The future must also be taken into account. Collective welfare as priority over individual welfare. Moreover, there is a time when the individual is at stake, while at another time it is the collective. Again, let us cite the example of parents with many children and who love each of them. Compared to the rest, one child is obstinate and recalcitrant. The parents do not want to say only to this child, we shall act according to your desire. If one's desire or liking is the criterion, then the desire or liking of others must also be considered. That is, anyone who wants to behave with utmost love toward his child must bear in mind that apart from the fact that desire or liking must not be the criterion, but welfare instead. Collective welfare must also be the basis and not individual welfare. We can observe so many instances when collective welfare is not compatible with individual welfare. In other words, if we take into account the welfare of an individual, the welfare of other individuals, no, that of the organization or society of which this individual is a member, collective welfare will be trampled upon, and in the end, that individual will also be affected. As such, in some cases, the individual welfare is to be sacrificed before the altar of collective welfare. In some cases of love, whose root, as we said, is to desire for what is good and wholesome, it necessitates the lack of leniency. It requires violence. It demands the maximum of whatever is undesirable to the other party, execution, whenever collective welfare is at stake. The philosophy of retribution, qisas. Look how comprehensive this Qur'anic expression about retribution is. We know for a fact that as far as penal law is concerned, the Qur'an advocates retribution. In cases when a person intentionally and without justifiable cause kills an innocent person, the Qur'an allows that he be executed as punishment for his crime. Here, this question may be posed. Now, he killed a person. Why should we kill another person? If killing is evil, why do we repeat doing it in the name of retribution? He has done something evil for killing a person. should we also kill him, thus putting an end to a life? In Surah 2, verse 179, God states, "There is life for you in retribution, O you who possess intellects." That is, do not regard such retribution as killing or murder. Consider it as life and life-giving, not the life of the criminal, but the life of society. That is, by executing a murderer, you have preserved the life of society, or the life of other individuals. If you do not stand in the way of a murderer, tomorrow he will kill another person. In the next days, he will kill more people. So, do not consider retribution decreasing of members of society. Consider it preservation of society. Do not consider it killing. Consider it life-giving. In sum, retribution does not mean enmity to man. It is friendship to man. Humanitarianism. There is another point I have to mention here, and that is, they say humanitarianism. This is correct, but the subject must be elucidated. In the jargon of seminary students, in humanitarianism, man is human for being humane. That is, man should be loved for being a human being. In today's parlance, man with human values. At one time in defining man, we say, with a head and 2 ears, man is an animal that can stand straight and talk. If this is what a human being is, then Tshombe was as human as Lumumba was. Those who wanted to crucify Jesus were as human as Jesus was. Like Jesus, they could also speak, and in those aspects, they had no difference with him. At another time, we say that man means this special body frame which is common to all individuals, and we must love fellow human beings means that we must love anyone from the children of Adam. In sum, by man, we mean the biological human being, that which is declared by biology as human being. Does it really mean so? Or does it mean human for being humane? That is, human on account of human values, on account of humanity. Humanitarianism means love of humanity. From this perspective, when we compare Lumumba and Tshombe, 2 types of being will surface. The former will emerge as one type and the latter as another type. That is, the former may emerge as a human being, a true human being with human values, and the latter may emerge as not only non-human, but also even an animal. In the Qur'anic parlance, much lower than the animal level. The human being must be loved on account of humanity and not on account of the outward bodily frame. In other words, humanity must be loved. Now, when a human being becomes inhuman and anti-humanity and stands in the way of the perfection of other human beings, should we still love this being that is nominally called human but not in reality? In the words of the commander of the faithful, Imam Ali, peace be with him, "The face is that of a human, but the heart is that of an animal." For the sake of humanitarianism, should we commit treachery against humanity and become anti-humanity? So apart from the fact that love is not merely following desires, but also the observance of the well-being, welfare, and interests of the other party, and that individual welfare alone cannot be the criterion as collective welfare must also be considered, the issue of humanitarianism is basically an issue of love of humanity. Otherwise, if by man we mean the Homo sapiens or biological man, then biologically there is no difference between man and animal. Why should we not love sheep the way we love fellow human beings? Why should we not love horses and donkeys as much as we love other human beings? The former are animals, so are the latter. If the criterion is animality and perception of grief and joy, then that which is in man can also be found in horses and donkeys. Thus, the issue must be traced to the love of humanity, as humanitarianism means love of humanity, and love of humanity, in turn, means observance of human welfare and not only following of desires. It is clear that this interpretation of the injunction to love fellow human beings in the sense of behaving in such a way that is desirable and agreeable to the other party while not considering other factors is illogical. In fact, the logical expression of love in some cases is naturally coupled with violence, struggle, resistance, and killing. Human beings who pose as obstacles to humanity must be eliminated. Goodness to unbelievers. In the Holy Quran, we can see that to love, to be kind, and to do good to all people, including unbelievers, is enjoined, provided that this act of love and goodness engenders goodness. Whenever an act of goodness does not produce goodness, it is not goodness. Rather, it is wickedness under the garb or clothing of goodness. For instance, a blessed verse of Surah Al-Mumtahana states, Surah 60 verse 8, God does not forbid you in regard to those who did not make war against you on account of religion, and did not expel you from your homes, that you deal with them with kindness and justice. Indeed, God loves the just. God forbids you only in regard to those who made war against you on account of religion and expelled you from your homes. At that time, it refers to the Quraysh who fought against the Muslims on account of religion, as well as expelled them from their homes. Yes, God does not prohibit you from not dealing with these unbelievers with kindness. That is, if we say, do not deal with the unbelievers with kindness, we mean their likes. Doing good to them is tantamount to doing bad to yourselves. It is a support to the enemy base which will naturally be used against you. Then it is stated again in the same verse, indeed, God loves the just. That is, behave justly. God forbids you only in regard to those who made war against you on account of religion and expelled you from your homes. Just behavior toward an unbeliever. Moreover, regarding justice or behaving justly and giving everyone their legitimate rights, including these unbelievers who fought against you and expelled you from your homes, the Quran still states, do not transgress the limit of justice. The earlier issue was that of kindness. It states, do not deal with them with kindness. How about the question of justice, giving of one's legitimate rights? Can we deal with them unjustly? The Quran states no. The initial part of the blessed Surah Al-Ma'idah, Surah 5 verse 8, says, and ill feeling for a people should never lead you to be unfair. Be fair, that is nearer to God-wariness. It is also indicated in other Quranic verses that waging war against unbelievers has some limits. That is, going beyond a certain point is an act of transgression. According to the Quran, in another verse, it states, Surah 2, verse 190, fight in the way of Allah those who fight you, but do not transgress. Indeed, Allah does not like transgressors. For example, when an enemy soldier lays down his arms and says, I surrender, after he has surrendered and put down his sword, you should not slay him, nor should you take an offensive against the enemy's children, women, old men and women, trees, towns, and springs. The Prophet circulated the same instructions among the Muslims before going to the battlefield. Therefore, whenever justice and its opposite, injustice, are at stake, the Quran states, even with regards to the unbelievers, do not transgress the limits. Do not oppress them. Deal with them with justice. Thus, justice must be observed under every condition. Kindness to the unbelievers is only permitted when it produces something good, but when it produces something negative either for oneself or for the Muslims, definitely it is not allowed. For example, it is said, do not sell weapons to an unbeliever. It is also said, however, that It is true if you know or suppose that if you sell this weapon to him, it will strengthen him, and in the future he will use the same weapon in fighting against you and in eliminating you. So this is in fact an act of indirect support to the enemy against yourselves. Do not do this, otherwise there is nothing wrong in selling to the unbelievers something which has no negative repercussions. Imam as-Sadiq, peace be with him, and a faithless man. In one of his travels, Imam as-Sadiq, peace be with him, saw someone by the road under a tree or beside a tree. It was obvious that he was in an unusually bad condition. The Imam, peace be with him, said to his companion, "Let us go this way. It seems that this man has a problem." Also, the man had no voice left to ask for help. They approached him and learned from his clothes that he was not a Muslim. He had a mantle. His co-religionists had a specific dress code through which they could be recognized. It became clear that he was alone in the desert, dying from thirst and hunger. The Imam immediately ordered that he be given food and water. In short, he was saved. The Imam's companion said, "This is an unbeliever. Can we also be kind to an unbeliever?" The Imam, peace be with him, replied, "Mere expression of kindness by giving him something brings no harm. If you show such kindness, have you become inimical to the Muslims? No. In similar cases, one must also show kindness and love. Goodness in return for an evil." I remember two verses. In one verse, acts of kindness which has good effect are enjoined. Surah 41 verse 34 states, "Good and evil conduct are not equal. Repel evil with what is best. If you do so, behold, he between whom and you was enmity will be as though he were a sympathetic friend." In relation to this verse, Sa'adi says, "O son, bestow for the one born of Adam a snare, through goodness, and for the wild beast by restraint." Of course, it is clear that moral instructions are not universal. Their cases are specified. In one place, it is said, "Do good because by doing so, you can change the heart of the other person. Change it and make it good." So if we want to express kindness at a time when the recipient will be glad and we know that the effect of this kindness is the elimination of an enemy in our midst, it is stated, express kindness. The addressee was the Prophet, and his enemy was also the enemy of religion. What is the issue of those whose hearts are to be reconciled, known in Arabic as al-mu'allafatu qulubuhum in Islam? Among the recipients of zakat are these whose hearts are to be reconciled. It refers to the non-Muslims who recently embraced Islam while still having weak faith, who must be taken care of by showing kindness to them and even by giving them financial assistance. This is just one verse. We have many textual passages with the same subject. We have many in the sayings of the Commander of the Faithful, peace be with him, and others. Patience in facing the mischief of polytheists. The other verse is as follows. In Surah 3, verse 186, it states, "And you will surely hear from those who were given the book before you, and from the polytheists much affront. But if you are patient and God-wary, that is indeed the steadiest of courses." Here, what are discussed are patience and God-wariness, sabr and taqwa, and not kindness. But in general, thus, you will be much annoyed by the polytheists and the people of the book. But O Muslims, do not be alarmed. Be patient and steadfast. Be wary of God. Do not immediately react to the wickedness of the polytheists and the people of the book. Here is prevention of reaction in kind, and this is considered illogical and reckless. But if you are patient and God-wary, that is indeed the steadiest of courses. That is, it is one of the actions based upon reason, logic, resolution, and firm purpose, and not motivated by illogical wishes, desires, emotions, or excitement. The correct interpretation of love. Meanwhile, this is not the subject of this passage in Surah 41, verse 34. Repel evil with what is best. If ever we do good to them, we do not eliminate their wickedness or turn it into good, and we do not turn their enmity into friendship. In fact, if we do good to them, we do something bad to human society. In this case, Islam ordains specific forms of violence whose highest limit is the issue of jihad on social concerns and retribution on individual cases of transgressions. But all these forms of violence stem from benevolence, public good, and prosperity. These are not exception to the universal rule of all religions: desire for people what you desire for yourself, and hate for them what you hate for yourself. The difference is in the way of interpretation. One interprets love in a childish way, saying, when you see that this person is an idol worshiper, busy worshiping his patron idol, what are you doing? You love him. Do not say anything that he does not like. Do not stop him. Do not resist him, and do not annoy him. This is inciting enmity. It is like the case of a number of individuals who are seriously ill, but they themselves do not want to be cured. This is the case when the people are ignorant. In the past, when the villagers were not yet accustomed to insect spray, and because of past experiences in which they always treated a government worker as an enemy, whenever agricultural workers with good intention would come to spray their plants as part of the government program, the villagers would bribe the workers to leave, giving them money in exchange for the insect spray, which they would just bury later. Now, if the people were such, we would say, we must not hurt their feelings. Now, they are annoyed. Shall we go? No, this is not a question of annoyance. In this context, these people must also be whipped in order to be informed of the benefit of what is to be done to them. Then they will realize its benefit. So love is a part of Islamic education, nay, in all religions, but with the difference that in interpreting love, we must be careful so as to not confuse this love with superficial love. Fostering the sense of seeking truth. Another concern in education is the issue of fostering the sense of seeking for truth. It is said that this insect exists in every person. For this reason, man is in pursuit of knowledge. This is one of the feelings or instincts that must be fostered in man. In this regard, there is no need to elaborate because everyone knows that knowledge is highlighted in Islam and seeking it is highly encouraged. Islamic history itself shows, as confirmed by all unbiased individuals, that the birth of the great Islamic civilization from the very first century after Hijrah. In fact, reading, writing, literacy, teaching, and learning different languages began from the time of the Holy Prophet, peace be with him and his progeny. From learning religious sciences to learning natural sciences, philosophy, medicine, and more, this was caused by the extraordinary encouragement of Islam to seek knowledge, and for Muslims, this is a sacred matter. Prejudice, ta'assub, as an impediment to knowledge. That which stands in the way of this pursuit is the issue of prejudice. Different types of prejudices serve as an impediment to knowledge. And we know that there has been a wide campaign against prejudice and bigotry in Islam. In Nahjul Balagha, there is a sermon called Al-Khutbatul Qasi'ah, the Sermon of Disparagement, which is a long sermon from the commander of the faithful. Essentially, the main subject of this sermon is prejudice and arrogance, takabbur, because the Arabs are known for their bigotry. Regarding this trait, the commander of the faithful strongly resisted the Arabs, mentioning the evils of prejudice. In the end, he said, "In case you cannot avoid vanity, your vanity should be for good qualities, praiseworthy acts, and admirable matters." For example, why should I study under the son of so-and-so while his father was an attendant in our home? Such foolish prejudice widely exists among the Arabs. In the words of Rumi, prejudice is severity, while severity is a sign of immaturity. Rumi says, "This world is even as the tree, O noble ones. We are like the half-ripened fruit upon it." He even then says to this extent, to take a tight hold and to attach one's self strongly to the world is a sign of unripeness. So long as thou art an embryo, thy occupation is blood drinking. Factors that contribute to training and upbringing. Now, after knowing how man should be according to Islam, how he should be according to reason, how he should be according to willpower, how he should be according to the sense of worship, how he should be according to physical fitness and training, and how he should be according to love, let us discuss the factors that contribute to these qualities. What are the factors that make these qualities assume a positive form in man? And what are the elements that contradict these qualities? We pay more attention to the specific factors emphasized in Islam itself. We have stated before that according to Islam, worship in itself is a code of training. In Islam, worship is a training ground. Vigilance, muraqabah, and self-reckoning, muhasabah. Another issue which I must mention is something which exists in religious training and education, and never in non-religious training and education. There is something which teachers of ethics mention, mystics particularly emphasize and highlight in Islamic texts, and that is what is called vigilance, muraqabah, and self-reckoning, muhasabah. Such concepts cannot be found in non-religious teachings and precepts. Vigilance and self-reckoning are basically senseless and not mentioned in them. In religious training and education, however, they are definitely discussed along with fundamentals like the belief in God and worship of Him. We have a verse of the Holy Qur'an which I may have quoted many times. When we were in Qom, a great teacher of ethics said that for some time he would stick to this verse. And since we have heard it a lot and thought about it a lot, it seems to have a different dimension in my mind. Among the concluding verses of the blessed Surah Al-Hashr, prior to the verses on Tawheed, there are verses which state, this is Surah 59, verses 18 to 19, "O you who have faith, be wary of God, and let every soul consider what it sends ahead for tomorrow, and be wary of God. God is indeed well aware of what you do, and do not be like those who forget God, so that He makes them forget their own souls. It is they who are the transgressors. And let every soul consider what it sends ahead for tomorrow." This is what I mean by vigilance and self-reckoning. Indeed, anyone who is vigilant sends ahead whatever is for tomorrow. That is, according to the logic of the Qur'an, all human actions are sent ahead. There are one or two verses that are additionally added in this regard. In Surah 2, verse 110, it states, "Any good that you send ahead for your souls, you shall find it with God." Sa'di acquired inspiration from this point for this poem. "Send to your own tomb the provisions for the journey. No one will bring them after you. Therefore, dispatch them before your departure." The expression "sending ahead" originated from the Qur'an. All human actions are sent ahead. That is, before going to a certain place, man sends something there ahead and is joined with it later. O men, have utmost care and vigilance on these dispatched items of yours. When you send something to a certain place, you carefully make an investigation first and then send it. The phrase "be wary of God" is repeated again, and then it is stated, "God is indeed well aware of what you do." First it says, "be heedful of yourself," and then it says, God is aware of what you do. It is as if it wants to say, if you are not heedful, there is still the ever-watchful who can see you. There is a time when a person sends something ahead and then says, well, whatever happens to it does not matter. Who can watch it? This verse states, no, this is not so. God is aware and cognizant of whatever you do. Some individuals who came to visit the late Ayatollah Burujerdi, may God be pleased with him, a few days before his demise, narrated that while in an extremely bad condition he would say, in short, my lifetime has passed and I am about to go, yet I have not been able to send something good ahead for myself or to do good deeds. In accordance with the customary habit towards power holders, one of those who were seated began flattering him, thinking that it was also a place for flattery. He said, why is your eminence saying so? It is we the wretched ones who have to utter this. Thanks to God, you have left so many good works. You have trained all these students. You have written all these many books. You have constructed a mosque with this magnificence and you have built schools. After hearing this, the Ayatollah quoted a tradition that says, Purify the action, for indeed the critic is all-seeing. That is to say, what are you saying? Action must be done with pure intention. There is an all-seeing critic. Have you imagined that the things in this form, according to the logic of the people, are definitely the same in the sight of God? God is indeed well aware of what you do. On the basis of this verse, this is why scholars of Islamic ethics claim that the mother of issues is morality, and that is vigilance. Vigilance means to assume your self is a partner who cannot be trusted and whom you must always be watchful of, as in the case of the inspector in an office. Take yourself as an office as well as the inspector of the said office that scrutinizes and examines all details. Vigilance is something which must always be in a person. That is, one must be always in a state of vigilance. We have said that there is another injunction which is called self-reckoning. This also stems from the Islamic texts. It is in Nahjul Balagha. And see how meaningful these sentences are. That is, it really shows that the spirits of those who have uttered these sentences have indeed been the authorities on earth. Anyways, it states in Sermon 89 that reckon yourselves before you are reckoned, and weigh yourselves before you are weighed. Right here, weigh yourself to see whether you are heavy or light. If you are light, it means that you are nothing, and if you are heavy, it means that you are something. Do not say that one is heavy as he is full of sins. According to the Quran, the scale on the Day of Judgment is a scale which only weighs the heaviness or lightness of good deeds. If there is good, it is heavy, otherwise it is light. In Surah 101, verses 6 to 9, it states, As for him whose deeds weigh heavy in the scales, he will have a pleasing life. But as for him whose deeds weigh light in the scales, his home will be the abyss. Weigh yourself right here and see if you are heavy or light. Here, Imam Ali, peace be with him, gives a general instruction for self-reckoning, but in our narrations, riwayat, there is a more elaborate interpretation of this point. As it is said in Al-Kafi, Volume 2, page 453, anyone who does not reckon himself throughout the day is not of us. Since most of you are physicians, I shall cite a relevant example. You have medical establishments, although no one calls you to account. You conduct an account of your cash office at the end of the day. And if you are particular with respect to your patients and you have a profile of them, you access your quantitative and qualitative performance at the end of the day. In the same manner, no aspect of human action is without reckoning. One of the sources of pride of the Muslim world in morality is that as inspired by the same divine instructions. We have a set of books on the issue of self-reckoning. Sayyid ibn Tawus has written Muhasibat al-Nafs. Kaf'ami has written a book with the same title. And in most treatises on Islamic ethics, and perhaps it is enjoined all in books on ethics, this issue of self-reckoning and self-vigilance has been presented. Self-restriction, musharita, self-admonition, mu'anibah, and self-chastisement, mu'aqibah. According to Islam, if a person wants to train himself, the first condition is self-vigilance. But it is said that prior to self-vigilance and self-reckoning, there is one thing and another thing after self-vigilance and self-reckoning. Prior to self-vigilance is self-restriction, musharita. That is, first one has to sign a contract with himself by writing on paper how he is supposed to behave. If one does not forge a contract with himself and the articles of contract are not specified, he will not know how to be vigilant of himself. For example, one has to sign a contract with himself that my food must be such and such, my sleep must be such and such, my speech must be such and such, the thing I have to do for my life must be such and such, the thing I must do for God's creatures must be such and such, my time must be divided in such and such way. One has to specify these items in his mind and put them in writing and affix his signature and make a covenant with himself to act according to this program. Then he must always be vigilant of himself to behave accordingly. Similarly, he makes an assessment of himself once a day. Did I behave according to what I have promised? Or have I been vigilant of myself or not? If he behaves accordingly, he expresses thanks to God and performs a prostration of gratitude. If he does not behave accordingly, the issue of self-admonition comes to the fore if he commits a minor violation, and self-chastisement if he commits a major violation. The chastisement can be expressed by fasting and imposing a difficult task upon himself and other means of self-punishment. These are among the indisputable principles of Islamic training and education. End of chapter 17.